Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nagasa from Sanyii Academy. Today I'm going to teach Moral and Citizenship Education Lesson 8 about principles of categorical imperative. If you're new for this channel, please start watching this video by subscribing and liking. And if you're already a member to Sanyii Academy, start watching this video by liking, commenting, and sharing. Having said this, I just directly proceed to today's lesson, which is about the principles of categorical imperative. In the previous session, last time, we have seen about what categorical imperative is and the justification behind categorical imperative. And we have said categorical imperative is self-evident and self-existent principle that is universally applicable and that Kant recommends that everyone has to just focus. There is no other option. So today we are going to focus on the principle that one has to follow in order to implement or carry out these categorical imperatives. There are three major principles that Immanuel Kant recommends for a person to implement in order to just come up with or in order to implement the categorical imperative principle. The principle of universality is one of that, because we have said a person has to do an act or perform an act thinking that the act he or she does is becoming a universal principle. So the first maxim is that we should choose our code of conduct, that means the act that we follow, only if they serve perfect or imperfect duty and are good for all. First of all, we have to identify whether the code that we are following is leading to perfect duty or imperfect duty. That is the duty that we have to differentiate first before going to implement. So these perfect duties are there and imperfect duties are there. We are going to look about that. So this principle of universality has an order that a person has to perform. Act only according to the maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it become a universal law without contradiction. A person has to think and also will, when he is acting, that the act he is or she is performing at the same time become a universal law which does not contradict itself. So this is a confirmation that the person has to take into account when performing his duty. So we are just connecting this thing with duty. So with regard to this, Kant divides the duty imposed by this formulation into two, perfect and imperfect duties. So when we are putting this principle of universality into account, we are focusing on that we are performing our duty, because categorical imperative is the moral theory that emphasizes on duty. So a person has to perform his duty, and the duty that this categorical imperative imposes on that person is perfect. Let us see these duties. The first one is perfect duties. These perfect duties are blameworthy if not met. That means if you do not accomplish them, if you do not practice them or discharge them, you would be blamed off and are basic requirement for human being. So these perfect duties are very basic and also important for the human being. So in this case, you would be blamed if you do not perform these duties. We first have a perfect duty not to act by the maxim that results in logical contradictions. I would just give example as we go through this. So first, when you are conforming to your perfect duty, you need to act that the duty that you are doing or the act that you are doing does not contradict logically. So it does not have logical contradiction. For example, proposition A says it is permissible to steal would result in a contradiction upon universalization because the notion of stealing presupposes the existence of property. Humans have got this notion, understanding of stealing before the existence of property or before the emergence of property. So it contradicts with that. So we should not contradict with the logical aspect of the action. But where A, what we have seen, it is universally permissible to steal, which is a proposition A. If we universalize, for example, that proposition, then there could be no property, and so the proposition has logically negated itself. It contradicts with itself. So if the proposition is universalized, then no property exists. Therefore, this principle has logically negated or disproved itself. An example of perfect duty is avoidance of suicide. A person should not kill himself or should not put himself to death by his own measurement or by his own act. Suicide is the end of life and can't believe that self-love impels the improvement of life. So he suicide ends life. And so, according to him, we need to improve our life through self love. If you love yourself, you continually improve your life, you continually make your life flourish. Therefore, it does not contradict with that because life proceeds or life pre exists this suicide. If a person commits suicide, improvement of life ceases. So it does not contradict with itself. So we should not you should not carry out this suicide. We should not kill ourselves. You should not kill yourself because life pre-exists suicide. So it does not contradict with itself as a proposition that we see it is permissible universally to steal, which negate itself. So this is what we call perfect duty. The second one is imperfect duties. These imperfect duties are those that do not achieve blame or they do not, yeah, it does not lead to what we call blame because they are important and you can do it or you cannot do it because you receive praise if completed and if you do not complete them, no problem at all. For example, cultivation of one's own talent, it does not just draws a sort of blame to that person who does not cultivate his own talent. So this is what we call imperfect ones. But if you accomplish them, if you complete them, then you would be praised of. For example, a person who achieved his PhD degree and performed well is praised for cultivating his talent, his own understanding and knowledge. Therefore, this is what we have to understand that imperfect duties are not blameworthy. They are not blameworthy. They are still based on the pure reason. So we have a reason to cultivate our talent. It allows for desires on how they are carried out in practice. So it allows our desires so we can make a choice here. This depends on the subjective preference of humankind. If a person is allowed or subjectively permitted to make a decision whether to cultivate his own talent or not, whether to marry or not, whether to just pursue certain job or care or not. So these are what we have to just do on the preference perspective. This duty is not as strong as perfect duty, but is morally binding. A person has a responsibility to cultivate his mind, his knowledge, his talent, and also make it for the betterment of the society. Otherwise, that is not important for him just to get what he wants, and the society also requires something from him. Unlike perfect duties, you do not attract blame here under imperfect duties, but you shall receive praise for it. You should complete it. So, in order to receive that praise, you have to complete it. Imperfect are circumstantial. That means they depend on situations, simply that you could not reasonably exist in a constant state of performing that duty. You are not expected to regularly perform those duties. Rather, they are circumstantial. It depends on the time and also situations. But perfect duties are unconditional and circumstantial. Imperfect duties are those duties that are never truly completed. That means you cannot complete it. Examples of perfect duties are perfecting the ability to write and produce works. So you continually just practice that one, they cannot be completed. So these are what sort of perfect duty that we have, and we are also morally bound to perform those imperfect duties in addition to following those perfect duties. The second one is principle of humanity as an end, never as merely as means. That means treat humanity as an end, not as a means to your own end. This maxim states that we should not use humanity of ourselves or others as a means to an end. That means you have to respect humanity. So that would become the main principle or the maxim that you have to follow when implementing this categorical imperative. So the thread that just recommend a person to move in that way is that act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person, yourself, or in the persons of any other. Never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. So you have to treat them. You don't have to use them as means for your own satisfaction. You have to consider them. They have absolutely they are in themselves. So their value is in. Some uses humanity as an instrument to their own end. For example, we are going to see about that. Every rational action must set before itself not only a principle but also an end. So a rational person acts as a rational action. So at this moment, you have to set something, some sort of principle, and also the end, the goal that you want to achieve as a result of implementing or putting that thing into practice. Otherwise, you are going to break the rule that is already given in categorical imperative. So let us come to this. Most ends are of subjective kind because they need only be perceived if they are in line with some particular hypothetical imperative that we have seen that a person may choose to adopt. So in this case, most ends that we have as human are dependent on our subjective interests, and some of them are for subjective interests. For an end to be objective, it would be necessary that we categorically pursue it. So we have to categorically pursue it for that a end or value goal to be an objective and acceptable by everyone. People as rational beings are ends in themselves. So they are not used as an instrument to achieve what a person wants, or should never be used merely as a means to other ends. For example, you don't have to kill a person to get satisfaction. You don't have to use a person to satisfy yourself of what you want. Even at the extent of thinking, you have to avoid that one. When we use a people simply as a means, as in slavery, for example, prostitution or commercial exploitation, we degrade them and violate their innermost beings as people. Because treating a person as a means or people as a means degrades the dignity of them. So slavery, for example, degrades the dignity of a person. Prostitution degrades the dignity of a person. Commercial exploitation of a person degrades the dignity of that person. So it contradicts with the principle of categorical imperative, which says treat a person as an end, not as a means, including yourself. So, for example, if a person uses himself or himself as a means to achieve an end, then that is morally wrong according to categorical imperative. So you don't have to sell yourself for sexual interest. You don't have to try that one because it is morally wrong and categorically wrong. The categorical imperative also regulates the morality of actions that affect us individually. So this also regulates the morality of actions we do individually because this would affect. Society would be wrong since I would be treating myself as a means to the elevation of my misery. Most of the people use suicide as a means to end their misery, problem, and what we see. They don't want to suffer, so they want to take actions just to save themselves from the coming suffering or problem. So suicide is wrong because it is using or treating your life as a means to end your suffering. So categorically wrong. The free will is the source of all rational action because we have said in the previous session that the only good one is good intention. Good intention, goodwill is the only good thing according to Immanuel Kant. So free will is the source of all rational action. So we depend on our will. But to treat it as subjective in is to deny the possibility of freedom in general. So if you treat this free will as subjective in or depend on your personal preference, then you are denying the possibility of freedom or autonomous actions. The autonomous will is the one and the only source of moral action. So when you decide, you should be morally autonomous and you should be free of any influence. So you don't have to be forced by situations or by people just to take actions and then this need to be just made that way. Kant drives second formulation of the categorical imperative from the first. So, a person has perfected in order to use humanity of themselves or others merely as a means to some other in slavery. So, we have just mentioned this. We should always treat people with dignity and never use them as a mere instrument. So, you don't have to use a woman just to get your sexual gratification, and you don't have to use a man as a means to get your sexual gratification. These are what we have to just take into account. Donating to charity is morally correct since this acknowledges the inherent value of the recipient. But there are some other situations in which this would be wrong. So, by contrast, we treat someone as a means to an end whenever we treat that person as a tool to achieve or something else. For example, if you give some bread or some money to a person who is in need and you use that thing as a means to get your gratification, your satisfaction, that is morally wrong. Because the will that you use to make that thing, a decision, is not purely good at itself. So you have to do that thing for charity by conforming to the principle of categorical imperative. So that is what we have to know. It is wrong, for example, to steal my neighbor's car since I would be treating her as a means to my own happiness. So I don't have to take the property that belongs to my neighbor to get satisfaction because I'm using here as a means to get my own satisfaction, my own gratification. And also, if you get into the pocket of someone and take out his money to get a bread for yourself, that is morally wrong because you are using him as a means to your own happiness or your own interest. The third one is the principle of autonomy. Autonomy is freedom, free act, free will. This is the third maxim state that we should consider ourselves to be members in the universal realm of indies. That means you have to think that you are a member to the universal realm of indies in which people interact. So you are autonomous. You depend on your own decision and capacity to produce ideas and decisions. Every rational being must so act as if he were, through his maxim, always a legislating member in the universal kingdom of Indies. So, in this case, when you are acting, you have to consider that you are member to humankind, and also you have the right and capacity to make legislation because your action is becoming one of the universal principles that everyone has to act on. So in this aspect, you need to focus on that. When you are willing that your action is coming to that point, then you are acting as a member of universal realm of in making that law, which we have said you are making universal laws. A truly autonomous will would not be subjugated to any interest. It would only be subject to those laws it makes for itself. When you are willing, your will, which is autonomous, should be considering itself as free of any situation and condition that may distort that will. So we need to understand this when we are acting according to the command of this categorical imperative. So the actor, should be autonomous. The will that produces that action should be autonomous. We should consider our actions to be of consequence to everyone else, in that our actions affect not only ourselves but that of others. So when you are making that decision, you should be very careful that your action is not only going to affect you but also other people. Therefore, it may have a consequences. Bearing that in mind, you need to consider how much that action is useful to everyone in that realm of illness. Everything we do should not only be of benefit to ourselves but to others also universally. We have to think, then it would be an important issue that we have to rationally consider to act, because it would benefit also other people. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, all at the same time, as in never merely as a means of repeating the same thing that we have said in the previous time. So we ought to act only by maxim that would harmonize with the possible kingdom of India. So harmony should be created in that kingdom of India. We have a perfect duty not to act by maxim that create incoherent or impossible states of natural affairs when we attempt to universalize them. So repeating the same thing that I have said in the previous time. So we have to conform to the perfect duty that is required by the categorical imperative principle. We have imperfect duty not to act by the maxim that lead to unstable or greatly undesirable state of affairs. So we need to also conform to our imperfect duties that are important for the harmonization of relationship among the universal realm of ends. The main problem with categorical imperative is rigidity. That means it does not conform itself to the principle of flexibility. It is not flexible, and it's rigid. It does not change through time, through age, through places, and everything. So everywhere it is the same. So Kant was asked about this personally and has said that this was needed, indeed the case. So the main reason why Kant argued that way is the categorical imperative principle should be rigid and also one throughout age, to everywhere, to every place, and every time. Morality is simply too complex, too full of exceptions for these theories to ever fully work. So we have to just understand that morality is too complex and also full of exceptions for these theories to ever fully work. So we need to understand that rigidity is what Immanuel Kant has recommended, so that it may remain stable throughout age, to everywhere, every country, and also every situation. So this is what categorical imperative should be. So generally, today we have seen about three basic principles of categorical imperative. The first one is the principle of universality. The second one is the principle of treating human as an end, not as a means. The third one is the principle of being autonomous. So these are very important issues that we need to understand to really grasp the concept behind what we call categorical imperative. So we need to act to that point. This is all I have for today. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and hit the notification button to get notified every time new video arrives on Sanyii Academy. Till next time, bye bye. Have a nice time.